I wanted to, with Breath of the Wild having just come out, I wanted to have a kind of frank but off-the-cuff discussion about positives and negatives of habitual video game playing. I've been playing video games since 1990, 1989, somewhere in there. First video games I played were, the original Super Mario Brothers. Played at a friend's house. One of the first video games I played at my house was, I think, something called To the Earth. My father had it, and I didn't. It scared me. I remember being scared of it, but I think that's the one it was. It was a light zapper gun for NES. But regardless, first video game I ever rented, Hudson's Adventure Island. We got Fester's Quest, and Ultima 4 on the NES. But regardless, I've been playing video games for a long time, and I wouldn't say that they've done me a whole lot of harm, but there's certain ways where they certainly were, impeding and detracting from life in general. So, what are some of the positives? Well, you pick up on a lot of tropes as you play video games, especially more narrative video games, but not even necessarily that. And the biggest thing that I've noticed is because, in addition to that, I do tend to read from time to time some self-improvement books, just general life philosophy type things, and you kind of pick up on a little bit of similarities between the two. And I regret never writing down specifically what it is exactly that I pick up, but the basic idea is that as long as you make life interesting and you have some kind of a goal that you're reaching for, then life is interesting, and you are constantly being pushed forward by this simple drive to achieve more. And then video games that don't have this are extraordinarily boring. Any kind of a game that you throw in an open world where you can't find something that's worthwhile to do, that gets boring after a while. It gets boring rather quickly. Once the novelty of the open world wears off, it tends to kind of drain away. And there are some video game players who can make their own objectives, which is super duper cool. But then most of us, we're kind of following along, and I don't know what to do, so I did all this stuff, and now what? Or these games that I find to be horribly unrealistic in their objectives. How do I describe this? When I say unrealistic, I don't mean that the world itself doesn't match Earth, because the world can be in its own ethos, have its own rules, and have it be completely dissimilar from anything we know here. The physics can be all wrong, the art can be all wrong. I don't mean that in terms of realism. What I mean is, within its own world, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You have a character who, ultimately the story is about this character learning and growing about himself and discovering a corruption within his government, say, for example. And then you run across certain characters who, just a half mile down the road, are completely oblivious to the dystopian world that's right around the corner. Or they have their own thoughts about what the dystopian world is, and it's not spreading out, it's not affecting things. The objective has now become farming. Let's farm stuff so I can get potions to kill monsters. Sometimes it's just a matter of taking a line of dialogue and fixing it. But that doesn't necessarily need to happen, and maybe that's a localization thing. But by seeing these tropes, you can identify similarities within real life. You can realize, well, okay, so now I'm at this job that's not taking me anywhere. I've got absolutely no objective in my life. I'm beginning to focus on more and more frivolous things. Perhaps I need to refocus, and perhaps I'm playing too many video games. So it would be as if you're learning the ins and outs of just about any type of lifestyle. And I appreciate that very much. Sorry, the guy's... Oh, he's changing the garbage. All right, that's cool. But then we take this a step further, and let's see, okay, so what else can be positive about video games? Well, primarily, it can be an extremely social activity. You can, meet and greet and play with other players and really bond over the art of the game. I mean, a lot of people are really into video game art, and they're creative, and they're creating these art pieces that are 100% inspired by the games that they've played. You know, just walk around any merch booth showcase at a con, check out Etsy, and you'll see all kinds of stuff that is creative and interesting, and people are enthralled with it. That and comic books, they seem to go hand in hand. And then the music. If you check out MagFest or any similar type con, the music inspired many artists who are playing now. And what's awesome is this is a real community thing. It's I suppose it's grassroots. I don't thoroughly understand the term grassroots, what it actually refers to, but if I were to say it seems like a grassroots type of a thing. These bands are not hyper popular, but you put them in a room with 500 people, these 500 people are screaming, clamoring for them. Very underground, and that's part of the fact that you got video game players are very, tend to be technologically hip, so they're going to understand ways of communicating with each other and getting data with each other, so that they can learn who the best artists are as far as the video game music goes. So between, learning these tropes and tropes about life and inspiration, and then your music and art and community, and then there's a lot of video game organizations that get together and do good for their community. It's not all devoid of altruism. Lots of good people and knowing you're in a good group with similar interests. It's a lot of fun, and I've always felt very welcomed when I met people who knew I liked to play video games and we could play together. But then beyond that, okay, so what are some of the negatives? Well, obviously, it can be life-consuming. I mean, one of the best taglines you can give a game is, it's addictive. Well, how is that? I mean, nicotine's addictive. You don't put... The people who advertise cigarettes don't go, hey, check this out, it's addictive. But people know what that means. It's the kind of thing that you purchase this game, you want to play it. And that can be a negative if you let that get in the way of your life, or if you let that get into too important and let it get in the way of all the other things. Now, that can be true of a lot of other things as well. I mean, you can always let your career focus on your life. You can let alcohol be the focus of your life. I mean, on the broad spectrum, video games to me kind of rests right in the middle of where the focus of your life should be. It's not great, but it's not horrible. It's okay. But then some other negatives are just general. In general, video games are a very sedentary thing. So if you are working a sedentary job and have sedentary habits, you are a sedentary creature. Even if your diet is really good, you're not getting the physical exercise you need to build the muscles that you need in your body. Now, there are alternatives to this. I mean, between Wii Fit, Wii Sports, and Connect and Move, and AR games, Pokemon Go, Ingress, there's plenty of ways that you can get exercise done while you're playing video games. Or even though you're habitually playing video games, you're still exercising. There are plenty of things that you can do there. But video games do not in and of themselves lend themselves towards that. So it's not like golf or tennis or soccer where this is your habit, this is your hobby. Habitually you're doing these things. It gives you that side benefit. Like, there's not a lot of physical side benefits to video games. You do spend a lot of time staring at screens, which I think LCDs are probably better for your eye than CRTs. But I don't know, maybe not, and without a doubt, it's narrow focus. You're sitting in a TV 8 feet away from you, that's where your focus is. That is not good for your eyes. So there's that. And then, I thought I had something that I wanted to come back to, but I can't think of what it was. What were we talking about? We were talking about the negatives of letting the video games be the focus of your life. If you were to let's say you were to let soccer be the focus of your life, and you became an ultimate soccer star. You're playing on a professional team like West Ham or DC United or wherever you are. if soccer is the focus of your life, you're getting paid a good chunk of change. Now, there are plenty of video game players who are getting paid a good chunk of change to play professionally. You could play professionally on Twitch. There's plenty of people who are doing that as well. And that's the interesting thing, is that with video games, it does seem to be a little more spread evenly. There are some great champion competitive video game players, but if you can just be a great player who plays on Twitch, and you can supplement that with some content creation, you can run that full time. Now, it's harder to get a foothold now. That market's already been snagged. But I find it interesting that you've got this, that the champion video game players are not highlighted. There's no television channel, there's no ESPN for video game players. So to make money professionally with video games, everybody I've talked to who works in the video game industry says you gotta love it, because either the money is not that great, or the hours are horrible. You're working like a dog. But you gotta love it. I mean, that seems like you'd really be into it, be passionate. So I guess I really didn't get too much into the positives and negatives. I went more into, here's a couple of positives, a couple of negatives, and I dove deep into what those things actually mean for people. But I mean, outside of that, what is there? Community, music, art, awesome. Sedentary, not productive. Now, it can that's another thing. It can distract from something else you should be doing. If your goal is, I'm going to work my 9 to 5 and I'm going to get home and I'm going to play video games, well, maybe there's something else out there that you should be doing. Maybe you should be taking online courses to advance your career. Maybe you should be working on some kind of a side business that you could become an entrepreneur outside of your own job. Maybe you should be focused on the community more, right? Although if all you know is playing video games, yeah, but if you're in a community, that might not be. But maybe there's something else you should be focused on. So maybe you should just need to consider, how many video games do I need to play every week? Well, I'd say if you're really, really into it, you'd probably want to be playing 2-3 hours a day. But that's if you're really trying to achieve something for some reason, Twitch or whatnot. I may be joining Twitch. I'm considering it, but I wouldn't be on very often. But then, let's say you want to have a career and a family and hobbies outside of this, and maybe something productive outside of video games. How much time should you spend playing video games every week? Well, shoot. I mean, you should play every week at least. But how much? How about 3 days a week you play for an hour? Is that enough? Problem is, with a game like Skyrim, you want to sink 120 hours into, or Diablo, you're going to sink multiple hundreds of hours into. That 3 days a week, 3 hours a week for a year is only 150 hours. You play one game a year? It's not like the old days in college and high school when we had time just lying around. You could play for 5 hours a day and then go out and do everything else you needed to do and still have an hour left over to drink a beer. I drank beer in high school. No. I didn't drink a lot of beer in high school. But you know what I mean. You had the time to do it. But not so much anymore. Now, we're scrounging for just a couple of hours. So, how do you balance that? Back in the day, you used to play your entire library. You'd play it to death. You would have gotten every achievement if PlayStation and PlayStation 2 had achievements. That's not the case anymore. And that's fine. It's just different. So you throw that in there. How do you balance that? Do you just not finish the game? You play it, you get a taste for it? Or do you do probably what I do, is I pick the game I'm going to play and I play that to death, and then I do a lot of other stuff and I just try it out. I tried out Alien Isolation. I don't know if I'll ever get back to it, but I tried it. Whereas Breath of the Wild, I think I'm going to kill this thing to death. Other thing is, some video games you can play while doing other things. I mentioned Pokemon and Ingress. You can run or bike while you play those games. That's cool. You could play a game like Diablo. As long as you're not pushing for the highest rift you've ever been on, when you're playing Diablo, I'm watching a movie or listening to a podcast. I'm getting stuff done while I'm doing it. I wish I could set up an exercise bike and play exercise bike while I'm playing Diablo. That'd be cool. Anyway, let's talk about Diablo. I got some ideas.